rather unusual. Rio heads to the beach, craving salt-grilled seafood, but he's shocked to see a giant shipwreck. He notices a man's dead body, which makes him feel sad, but then he suddenly hears another man's grunt, relieved and happy to realize someone is still alive. Abel remembers how the ship was destroyed by a giant sea monster, and when he wakes up, he's surprised to find himself alive. He looks around and sees his belongings placed next to the bed, so he grabs his sword and walks out of the house. Rio arrives and greets him. Abel is surprised that he couldn't sense him at all. Judging by the way Rio is dressed, he assumes Rio has nothing else to wear, but quickly realizes he shouldn't think poorly of the man who saved him. He introduces himself and thanks Rio for saving him, but Rio mentions that all he did was bring him home, so there's no need to thank him. He shares the sad news that, unfortunately, no one else survived. Abel realizes their bodies must have also washed ashore. He reveals that they were all smugglers, so Rio doesn't need to worry about them, but this shocks Rio. However, before Abel can say anything else, his stomach growls from hunger, so Rio invites him to lunch. While eating, Abel learns that Rio doesn't own any clothes, which surprises him, so he asks why he doesn't buy new clothes. But he soon realizes that since Rio has no money, he can't procure necessities. He thinks he might have offended Rio, but he mentions that there aren't any towns around here, so he can't just buy new clothes. Abel realizes he must have gotten the food by hunting, which impresses him, and he wonders if Rio used the knife to hunt. But Rio reveals that it's only for self-defense and cleaning whatever he catches, because he uses water magic for hunting. Abel is impressed because even in the central provinces, only about half of the population can use magic, and he is part of the ones who can't. Rio remembers Michael told him that the percentage of the magic users is 20%, but Abel is unable to understand his mumbling. So Rio says it's nothing. So Abel asks Rio to take him to the coast since he wishes to confirm something. On the way, Abel asks Rio if he needs a staff since he is a magician, but Rio tells him that he doesn't have one, which shocks Abel, and he thinks Rio is too poor to afford it. He tells Rio that if they run into any trouble, he should let him take the front line. But Rio refuses. Abel insists that it's the least he can do, otherwise his reputation will get tarnished for always being the one getting saved, so Rio reluctantly allows him. As they reach the shore, they are shocked to see that the bodies are gone. Rio thinks either the monsters ate them or the water carried them back into the ocean. Abel reflects that if Rio hadn't saved him, he would have met the same fate, so he's grateful to be alive. Rio remarks that he must be very lucky, and Abel agrees. Abel then mentions that it feels odd for the man who saved his life to be calling him Mr. Although Rio believes Abel is older than him. Since he's requested it, he agrees to call him by his name. This makes Abel happy, as that's how all his friends address him. Rio is surprised that Abel considers him a friend, but as he's thinking about it, Abel informs him that he couldn't find what he was looking for. Rio then asks what he plans to do next. Abel says he needs to find his friends somehow, and the first step is to reach the town of Loon. Although Rio hasn't been there himself, he believes it lies to the north, and that they'll need to trek across that side of the island. Abel then gets an idea and decides to recruit Rio as his guide. Rio agrees, on the condition that he gets at least one day to make his preparations. Rio realizes he won't be able to continue his dream of living a slow life. At night, when he tells Abel that he needs to bid farewell to someone, he is surprised since it's very late, but Rio mentions that the person is only available at this time. As he leaves, Abel remembers how he earlier said that no one else lived around there, but he thinks perhaps he wants to pay his respect to someone, and maybe he wasn't always alone on the island. But nonetheless, it's not his job to intervene in Rio's personal matters. Sometime later, we see that Rio has actually gone to bid farewell to the Dullahan, saying he will be leaving the forest of Rondo for a while, but he feels grateful for the training he has received that has enabled him to survive. He knows he will be away for a while, so he decides to use all his power in their last sparring session. Rio charges forward with full force, but the Dullahan easily deflects all his attacks. leaving him exhausted. Before leaving, the Dullahan gives him new clothes, which makes Rio very happy and promise to wear with pride. The next day, they finally begin their journey, and Rio wears his new outfit, which fits him perfectly. But on their way, they soon run into a lesser boar, so Abel tells him to stand behind him and observe. He charges at the boar and activates the combat skill called Total Impalement, which creates a hole in the boar's abdomen, and it dies on the spot, impressing Rio. He wonders what sort of skill it is, so Abel thinks a magician like him must have seen it for the first time, but it's very common for swordsmen and other people who use weapons to fight. The next morning, as they resume their journey, Abel hears a sound and they notice 2 lizards in the marsh. Abel thinks they'll be difficult to deal with in the water, so they decide to take another route to avoid them. As they move along the alternate path, Rio senses that the lizard folk are following them. He informs Abel, who realizes they have no other choice but to fight. Rio tells him that there are a lot of them, so he'll use his magic to take them out. Abel reminds him that he doesn't have his staff, but Rio simply chants a spell and kills them all with icicles, shocking Abel. Together, they take out all the lizard folk. After the fight, Abel asks Rio about the spell, noting that the wind magicians he knows can only cast a single spell per invocation. Rio suggests that maybe it's different for water magic. Before they resume their journey, Rio uses magic to summon water so they can stay hydrated. However, Abel notices that Rio used a different incantation than before, which makes Rio nervous, and he quickly changes the topic, saying Abel must be imagining things. After walking for a bit, Abel gives Rio a coin, and he's surprised to see it since it's his first time seeing this world's money. So Abel explains that it's a bronze florin used in the kingdom of Knightly, where Lune is located. He further explains that in the central provinces, each mints their own coins, but they all use the same denominations, and Knightly is one of the 3 major nations, with the other 2 being the Debuhi Empire and the Handelu Federation. Rio finds the name Debuhi a bit strange, so Abel wonders if he has a problem with the nation. Rio clarifies that he just finds the name a little unusual. He explains that a nation's name is very important to its people, since they have to introduce themselves everywhere as being from Debuhi, which does sound odd. Rio admits he wouldn't like to introduce himself like that, and Abel thinks he's overthinking it a bit. After some time, they finally get out of the forest, but as they are walking, Abel notices a rock moving, so he gets ready to attack. But Rio creates an ice wall, which blocks the rock. Abel notes that they have been surrounded as they have stumbled into a rock golem's nest, but Rio is surprised to see the rock golems, since he always thought they were humanoid with arms and legs. Abel tells Rio to stay there while he charges forward towards the golems, but his total impalement attack has no effect on it, as it quickly regenerates itself, which shocks him. Rio tells him that he has an attack he wants to try, so Abel tells him to go ahead. Rio creates 10 layers of ice walls joined together and drops them over the golem to immobilize it. Abel is shocked to see such powerful magic, but Rio casually mentions that he's only taken out 2 golems so far and plans to do the same with the rest. Soon they take out most of the golems and only one remains, but surprisingly it isn't moving. So Rio thinks perhaps they draw energy from the ground, and since it's flipped over it can't draw energy from Earth. Just then, Abel notices a big magic stone attached to its bottom, which makes him happy, but he wishes he could collect it from the rest as well. But unfortunately that won't be possible now. On their way, the duo notices a giant hippo sleeping, and Rio wonders if Abel wants to slay it, but Abel has no such ambitions. He reveals that he's never seen it in person, but it appears to be a behemoth. Suddenly, they notice several wyverns approaching, which excites Rio. They'll be able to witness a monster battle from the front row. Abel thinks the behemoth is at a disadvantage, but Rio believes it won't go down so easily. As the wyverns begin to attack, the behemoth gets up and lets out a loud screeching sound that knocks them out, making the wyverns fall to the ground. Rio explains that it used magic negation. At night, as they set up a fire to cook their meal, Rio jokes that he was hoping for a match between Abel and the behemoth, but Abel tells him that's not happening. He mentions that he's heard of traps in dungeons with similar effects, but he's never actually seen magic negation before. Hearing the word dungeon dungeon excites Rio, and Abel wonders if Rio wants to hear more about them. Rio says he would like to visit a dungeon himself, so Abel tells him that there's only one dungeon in the central provinces, and luckily, it happens to be in the town they're headed to. Rio jokingly asks why Abel has been hiding this information from him, prompting Abel to get defensive, saying he didn't know he was so interested in dungeons. Rio continues teasing him, asking if he's kept any more important information from him. So Abel asks if he knows about elves and dwarves. Rio tells him that he doesn't, so Abel informs him that dwarves are skilled smiths and they are good at fighting. Also, Loon has a few of them. He further explains that Loon only has one elf, while the rest are settled in the woods, which they never leave. So Rio thinks it's just the way he has pictured, but Abel doesn't believe him since he has never been outside that island. The next day, Rio continues to lead the way and reveals that across the mountain, they'll find a human settlement. Abel wonders how he got this information, so Rio recalls how the dragon told him everything. He tells Abel that it's better if he doesn't know, and he calls his source of knowledge beyond humankind. As they walk, they suddenly sense something approaching from behind. In that moment, a giant griffon appears, leaving Abel in shock, who is frozen in fear. But Rio quickly takes some meat from his sack and throws it into the air, and the griffon grabs it and flies away. They're both relieved to have survived. Abel notes that he was completely stunned, while Rio admits they might not have made it if they had tried to fight it. Abel thinks they aren't built to fight such monsters, and he notes there aren't many reports of anyone running into behemoths or griffons for centuries, so he thinks something is wrong with this place. Rio finds it a bit rude, and he thinks maybe humans aren't looking hard enough, so Abel thinks perhaps these frozen mountains have been keeping them out of human territory. As they're walking, Rio suddenly remembers that the wyverns that attacked the behemoth came from the direction they're now traveling. Soon, they spot some wyverns feeding on their prey, and Abel notes that they can't fight them. It usually takes around 20 experienced adventurers to take down just one, and even then, there are often casualties. Rio thinks that even if they try to avoid them, they'll likely encounter more along the way, and they won't be able to avoid fighting forever. Rio wonders if it would be easier to fight the wyverns while they're on the ground, and Abel agrees, thinking he can use his sword more effectively that way. So Rio steps forward to engage them. He summons several ice spikes to stab the wyverns, and Abel follows up with his total impalement technique. However, the wyvern's screams attract more of their kind. Rio uses an ice attack from above to bring them down, and Abel quickly finishes them off. After the battle, they collect the magic stones. Abel admits he can't believe how easy it was, while Rio wonders if Abel was hoping for a life and death battle just to get his heart racing. Just then, another flock of wyverns is on the way. They both prepare to fight, knowing they have no choice but to defeat them in order to keep moving. After successfully taking them all down, they reach the top of the mountain and are overjoyed to see a human settlement on the other side. After defeating so many wyverns,